Hello, everybody, and everybody out there. It's so nice to be here again. Cal Southern's starting to feel like home. So we have a lot to learn today, and I'm really excited about talking and sharing some of the most important information that's made a difference in my life. So here we go. Okay, I have to do two things at once. This should be fun. So today we're going to talk about harnessing the power of the zone. So we're going to talk about what happens in performance, what blocks us from our own peak performance, and what helps us achieve greater performance. What is this zone that Barbara was talking about, and how do I get there? Why do we teach heart rate coherence first? And digging deeper at the end, we'll talk a little bit about in sports what's called a yip, or a hesitation, or a hiccup. And then we'll talk about this integrated approach for teaching and success. Let's see if I can do this. Okay. So years ago, I was introduced to a company called HeartMath, who taught me about how the heart is the regulator of emotions, not the brain. Well, that was a little surprising to me. And through learning how to manage our heart rate, we can become better performers. That was very intriguing. HeartMath has developed some tools, some simple tools to assist us in regulating our heart rate patterns. So what is this peak performance? Think of it this way. We're energy systems that expend and renew our physical energy over time, mentally and emotionally. Resilience and optimal performance and health are grounded in the intelligent management of our expenditures. So the zone is where we're synchronized between the heart and the brain and the nervous system to create the smooth evenness that Barbara mentioned. I don't even get to the remote at home, so this may take me a few slides. So this smooth and even pattern, I had the opportunity to teach heart rate training at a triathlete camp. And a freelance writer, Sara, who is quite an accomplished triathlete herself, decided because of the results she got and she saw the other athletes get that she would write an article for Triathlete magazine. And this is what it said. She says, "There is a place all athletes want to go, but few know how to get there. The elusive place is called the zone, and a company called HeartMath has created a roadmap to get there. The zone is not a mystical place of higher consciousness. It's a state of whole body synchronization, or coherence." Now, doesn't that sound magical? So athletes, what are you doing? You're pushing the limits. I'm in a room full of athletes right now, and sometimes it hurts, and sometimes it helps. Pushing the limits means to stretch or to grow or go beyond where you formerly were. And that means mentally, physically, emotionally, and sometimes there are growing pains. So who looks stressed in these pictures? Well, negative or positive, stress is still stress, right? Performance is stress. No matter what you're doing, the key to success is figuring out how to manage this stress. So what is this stress? Let's define it. Stress just means change, going from one place to another. It can be positive or negative. Stress is bringing about change. And the stress reaction is what we do with that change. So any type of performance, like speaking or being a student, can be stressful. Peak performance simply means it's the best you can do at that time. Today we're going to talk about heart rate variability. The heart at rest was once thought to operate much like a metronome, back and forth, a regular heartbeat. Isn't that what you think about the heart when you're relaxed? Scientists now know, rather than being this monotonous, regular rhythm, it's really got some variability to it. That's a natural beat-to-beat variation. In the heart is called heart rate variability. So that's what we mean. It's irregular and constantly changing. That's normal. So why is heart rate variability important? The scientists and physicians consider heart rate variability to be an important indicator of health and fitness. It's a marker for physiological resilience and behavioral flexibility. It reflects our ability to adapt effectively to stress and environmental demands. Now, if you're an athlete who performs outside, there's always some kind of environmental demand. Heart rate variability is, remember, the indicator of health and fitness. So, what's the zone? What's it look like? Let me sync up here. There it is. It's a smooth and even heart pattern, which synchronizes the heart and the message to the brain. The message to the brain when you're in this smooth and even pattern, and I want you to notice something, the space between the beats is consistent and even. That's called coherence, heart rate coherence. The message to the brain is then to focus. It's not going to that fight or flight mechanism. It's to push and to have greater performance. So high levels of resting heart rate variability are associated with superior performance tasks like concentration and in our executive function. The students will be happy to know this. Heart rate variability is especially in the heart rate coherence zone, can be manipulated in order to improve our thinking. Now let's look at the science a minute behind this heart rate coherence. Remember, it's not from the brain to the heart that we need to send the messages, it's from the heart to the brain. Most of us have been taught that the heart simply just takes orders, right? That was like when I grew up, we just took orders, right? It's not as commonly known that the heart actually sends more signals to the brain than the brain does to the heart, about 60 times more signals. The heart signals have this significant effect on the brain, and I like to think of it as rebooting that fight or flight mechanism into balance. So some more science. At the Institute of Heart Math, the research has shown that generating sustained, and this is key, positive emotions facilitates a body-wide shift to specific and measurable states. When you saw that heart rate zone, that was a specific and measurable state. The term is psychophysiological coherence because it's characterized by an increased order and a harmony both psychologically, emotionally, and mentally, and physiologically in the body responses. So remember that term, psychophysiological coherence. That's your state of optimal performance. So the key is heart rate coherence and positive emotions have to do with mental toughness. It's not just a breathing technique. Heart math tools focus on this intentional generation of a heartfelt positive emotion, and this emotional shift is a key element of the techniques that we're going to learn. Mental toughness begins in the heart, okay? I once met an ultra marathoner. I was walking across a parking lot, and she and I began to talk. Ultra marathon, really? That's like 50 plus miles. There's some people in this room who have done marathons, but ultra marathon. So I thought, I wonder what she does when she hits the wall. You know what the wall is? I wish you guys could see some of these faces. The wall is where I just can't keep going. I can't do one more thing. I'm never going to make it. And all the feelings in the body that go along with that. So I said to this woman who is a top level athlete, what do you do when you hit the walls? Because I figure ultramarathon, you got to hit more than one, right? And she said, you know, I figured out what works for me. And I said, what? She said, I look around the course, I find somebody, and I say, go, you can do it. You're doing great. She says, I don't know what's happening, but every time I do that, I feel better. And whatever pain I had or whatever tension I had or negative thoughts, they just seem to disappear. And I said, well, do you want to know why you intuitively, see, she intuitively discovered that after years of training. Intuitively, what happened is she generated a positive feeling. She smiled, she encouraged somebody else, and she breathed, and she synced up from that fight or flight mechanism, that pressure, that stress, to this grounded focus. Now, she didn't slow down. In fact, she said her pace improved. And so she intuitively discovered the zone and kept returning. She smiled, she connected with other people, and she felt better, and she breathed. I thought she was brilliant. So you can push through. Sustained optimal performance is all about resilience and coherence. The heart is a muscle. Muscle has memory. The more you train this muscle for heart rate coherence, the more you'll be able to rely on it. You can develop a greater capacity to handle this stress efficiently over time. The better resilience you have, and now I think you're starting to see this isn't just about sports, is it? It's about how to handle stress in your life in its entirety. So let's look at a little bit more science. So what hinders our peak performance is this emotional mismanagement of the stress. It's the prime disabler, actually. If she had been this runner focusing on how tired she is and how hard this is getting, and I have 35 more miles to go, I mean, I would feel a lot worse. I don't know about you. But it would affect her in this emotional mismanagement. Can you imagine what her heart rate might look like? And so in this physiological response, you want to have the intelligent use of emotional regulation, and that's the key to making that shift while you're under pressure. Now, there is a place that we'll talk about where athletes trip over what I call fear. Pre-race fear. How about fear and anxiety while training? I don't know if I can do this. It's a distressing emotion caused by impending danger, like this is going to hurt. I don't know if I can do this. What is this fight or flight response? It's our body's natural defense mechanism. It is made to help keep us alive and conserve our energy. When you're out there and you're pushing, you can reboot and get back to balance. So what hinders our peak performance is this incoherent rhythm, because it sends a mixed signal to the brain. It's sort of like you've got while you're driving, one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake. And this message to the brain is like speed up, slow down, speed up, slow down. And that just drains us. When you're doing your sport, you want to have a conservation of energy, not a drain of energy. I want to tell you a little bit about a competitive cyclist named Brian who came to see me. Now, what Brian wanted to do was improve his turns in the competitions. He felt like when he was coming up on the turns, he felt like he was slowing down, he was getting cautious, and he was losing time. And then he was really pushing after the turn to make up for that time. Now, can you just get a sense of that kind of push-pull? That's not a very efficient use of energy. So the first thing I did was teach him heart rate coherence. He got into the zone, that smooth and even pattern, and his time improved. However, he still felt a hesitation, so he came back. And we practiced and practiced, and then we shifted to a psychotherapy method called EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. What Brian had as he was observing his performance was what we call a yip. A yip is a hesitation in the nervous system. It's not necessarily a thought or a feeling, it's this hesitation. And maybe you've experienced it, or if you're watching sports, you can see it. It's very subtle. The higher level the athlete, the more subtle the yip, but it's in the nervous system. So after processing with Brian through EMDR, which is another lecture, it's not today's, what we discovered is a spontaneous memory of when Brian was 8 years old, a happy little boy riding his bike, approaching a corner from his mother's vantage point down the street. She thought the oncoming car was going to hit him. So she let out a blood-curdling scream, which Brian heard and felt. Now, Brian's an adult man competing in cycling races and had no memory of this at all until we did the processing. What we discovered is there was a current event in the last 4 months where he observed, he wasn't involved in it, but he observed people cornering and somebody skidding out. Well, he's seen it a dozen times. But for some reason, all the variables came together, and that event currently triggered the body memory of his mother screaming and him doing this. This is a yip. So Brian began to lose time in his cornering, but had no understanding of why. Once that memory was reprocessed through the EMDR therapy and the adding of the heart rate coherence, Brian not only picked up speed on his turns, but he found that his level of racing improved in all areas. Heart rate coherence is used throughout his competition now. And it was very, very exciting. We also used some visualization. While in the office, he could visualize, while in heart rate coherence, in that smooth and even pattern, his perfect race. So what does this look like? So the top graph, as you look at this, is where a person was asked to recall a frustrating experience. This is what we call an incoherence, where the autonomic nervous system is not synchronized, that fight or flight mechanism. That's where that 1 foot on the gas, 1 foot on the brake is happening. And that's an energy drain. It's also got some wear and tear on the system over time. So it holds true on the body and emotionally. When there's stress, the autonomic nervous system, so let's call that the engine, is not running efficiently. And what happens when it doesn't run efficiently? There's wear and tear, it breaks down. There's some risk that can happen, such as illness or hesitation, like those yips, or even some cardiovascular problems over time. So the bottom graph, if you look at that for a moment, this is heart rate coherence, the smooth and even pattern. This is your zone pattern. It sends a message to enhance brain function. It enhances concentration, quickness of movement, and strategic thinking. Wouldn't all those be important to the athlete, to the student, to the musician, to the singer, to the performer, to the speaker? That would be good. And here's another way to look at it. Heart rate coherence affects this thinking, feeling, and being able to push beyond your limits, because you need to conserve energy, not drain energy. And you also want these efficient reaction times and able to think and act quickly. So, energy drain, that wasn't a shark out there, it was a dolphin, thank God. Energy gain, man, I'm glad that's over. I'm on to the next place. That would be my bike. So the nervous system stores information, and sometimes it stores it in a way that's going to disrupt your heart rate variability. And this is what can hinder our peak performance. Being out of sync drains our energy. I was referred a very top-level tennis player not too long ago. And the parents and the coaches were very concerned because her emotional dysregulation, and what does that mean on the tennis court? Her anger, her frustration, her throwing the racket was really getting in the way of her performance. And in her particular arena, it could cause a disqualification. You cannot win and be at your peak performance if you're disqualified. And the higher level the athlete, what happens? There's a loss. There's a huge potential loss if somebody can't regain themselves. So after the parents said, what is wrong? Why don't you just stop this? After the coaches were saying, knock it off. All very helpful. After heart rate coherence training, she began to have these tools to regulate herself in the moment on the court. Inner confidence, it's very empowering to be able to shift your emotional state in the moment. She improved dramatically, and it was noticeable to everybody. So research at the Institute of HeartMath was shown that one of the most powerful factors that affect our heart rhythm is our feelings and emotions. So now I bet you're going, okay, but how do I do it? How do I do it? In its simplest form, and I will say simplest form today, there's 3 easy steps. So for right now, take a moment. Do you remember when you're learning your sport and you're told, focus on the muscle, like when you're lifting, right? Bring your attention to the stroke in your pedal or the stroke in your swimming. Bring your attention to it. What does that do? That shifts your attention, you're letting go of thoughts, and what you focus on regains a sense of strength. So heart focus, if you'd like to walk through this with me just for a moment, shift your attention to the middle of your chest. And don't hit your mic when you do it. Heart focus, and then begin to take a heart breath. Feel the rise and fall of your chest. Heart focus, heart breath. And then here's the other key to heart rate coherence. Think of something in your life you're grateful for. A positive sense of gratitude. Once you've got it, let go of the thoughts as if they're just going by. and bring that felt sense of gratitude to your heart. And breathe in this heartfelt sense of gratitude. Now, if I had the opportunity to hook you all up to the technology, you would see your heart rhythms beginning to smooth out. And maybe you even feel a little different right now. So, we'll talk some more about this coherence training for athletes. Beginning with heart rate coherence training is the tools that I found to be the first thing out of the gate. The swimmer in triathlon training, I was at this camp teaching, and in swimming, when we're training, you have a warm-up set, a main set, and a cool-down set. Warm-up set, cool-down set, no big deal, great to be in the water. The main set is where the coach tells you how far you're going to go and how fast it should take you. And it's very stressful. Everybody gets a little anxious before the main set. So I taught everybody heart rate coherence, and I gave them, everybody chose, visualized a color that they considered their color of confidence and power, and they set out to do their main set. One of the ladies ahead of time said the hardest thing for her on the main set was at the last 100 meters, she just started to fade. She said, I just wish I could push through, I just fade. So I said, okay, when you're getting close to your last 100 meters, focus on your heart, see your color, and go. Well, of course I was watching, because in sports, when you help people, you can see if it's working or not. And it was absolutely amazing. Through her whole career, she was fading at the end. This particular time, the next thing you know, you saw her take those last 100 meters faster than she had all the other 100 meters. And the coach and I looked at each other, and then she came out of the water. She jumped up. She said, this works! And it's so intuitive. Now she has a tool. She knows now that she can get beyond her former belief of fading in that last 100 meters. And she actually had her best time ever. That was fun. The other thing that happens is it felt effortless. If you're in heart rate coherence, you've been in the zone in your life, whether it's athletics or something else. It feels effortless, doesn't it? You know when it kicks in. So HeartMath has developed some tools. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Hold on, I got to catch up here. Okay. HeartMath has developed some tools to help in measuring in the training process. The M-Wave technology allows you to observe your heart's changing rhythms in real time using your pulse data. It provides a picture of your heart rate variability similar to what we saw in those graphs. It plots the natural increases and decreases in your heart rhythm, and it's really good feedback. Athletes have been known to take it's a portable M-Wave, there's a desktop version as well, and athletes have been known to take their M-Waves everywhere, on the tennis courts, the football fields, on their bikes. Technology provides a more specific and concise training results. When you're in coherence, it's like sitting at a gas pump and filling up with resilience and energy. It builds this operational resilience that has a carryover effect. Like Brian said to me later, that this training carried over to the rest of his cycling. And actually his wife said he was in a much better mood. So that was good. Just like any other kind of fitness training, you can spin out, you can get amped up, you can be upset. However, your inner heart rate fitness will prompt the memory. Remember, the heart is a muscle. It has memory. And you'll say, uh-oh, I don't want to do this. I want to do this. And the heart remembers, and you're able to reboot yourself. And again, that builds a lot of confidence, and it feels very empowering. This is just the desktop version. The technology supports your practice and gives some direct feedback. And it's got some interactive games, which are really interesting. HeartMath has been featured in over 30 peer-reviewed medical journals. So let's review. Coherence for athletes creates maximum concentration, focus, and mental clarity, even under pressure. It improves our motor coordination, it relaxes our reaction times, and it reduces muscle tremors, which we also call those yips. It's a perceptual clarity. A lot of people report their vision feels like it gets better when they're in coherence. There's another thing that happens when a team is doing heart rate coherence. Think about that just for a moment. If the entire team is in heart rate coherence, there's an increased intuitive synchronization with the other team members. This self-regulation of fear and performance anxiety, worry and frustration shifts to power and confidence and encouragement. Think about that for a minute. That seems really powerful. Teams have used this on the football field, on the basketball court, at breaks, at timeouts, in the locker room. So the following world-class athletes have improved their performance as a result of coherence training. I remember getting into this field and wondering, why are we not teaching mental toughness training? I don't see it taught consistently like other types of training. I'm a recreational triathlete, and I can find a coach for every part of my sport and every part of my sport. But I got no coaching on mental toughness training. And when you're out there in the middle of nowhere, seemingly by yourself, it would be nice to have some tools. So in my own work, the stories were compelling of the people I began to work with and teach heart rate coherence. The athletes themselves would describe the results of what they were getting. And basically, when the going was getting tough, heart rate coherence improves their mental toughness. So let's enjoy what these athletes are saying. Anna Hemming. She says, I'm not a sports psychologist, but I am trained in a heart math practitioner and work with many Olympic athletes. A lot of sports psychology works on the think-feel principle, whereas heart math is about changing your physiology. If you can change this, you can change the way you think and feel, and this affects your behavior, endurance, decisions, and performance. Anna really reminds us to use heart rate coherence first, and it will be the basis of changing your thoughts and your feelings. Now, this is a marksman, okay? And she says shooting is a sport where heart rate is very important. While aiming the rifle, sportsman focuses on firing between heartbeats. Wow. With heart math tools and training and the M-Wave, I became extremely quiet and able to focus. After a few weeks, I had a remarkable breakthrough and won several competitions. The M-Wave makers visible the state of my body, and I was able to use the feedback to enter in a state of peak performance. What she's referring to is with the technology, you can actually see levels of coherence, low, medium, high. It's not just being in coherence. You can actually start tweaking and getting the heart rhythm into a much more precise heart rhythm. Endurance skiers use heart math, and they say coherence training allowed me to rediscover my true gifts and talents. Karen is a Olympic sprint kayaker, and she says coherence training helps you learn how to go inward and breathe effectively, controlling stress and anxiety. I am forever grateful for the skills which have helped me in the sport and in life. One of the things that seeing this testimonial reminds me of is, you know, in pain management, where they say, like after a surgery and you need to manage your pain, you make sure you take the medication before you're at an 8, 9, 10. So in recovery, you're not trying to manage the pain, you're staying at a low level. Well, in heart rate coherence, what she's saying is she doesn't have to get anxious and out of control to bring herself back. She's staying at this place of the zone as much as possible. When you get out, you can bring yourself back. It's this shifting. That's what we call that inner flexibility of the heart rhythm. And that's what gives it the strength, is being able to stay within this zone. When you're really out and you're amped, it's work to bring it back, okay? So it's really about getting more and more precise with the training. A cyclist says that in his racing team, he uses the M-Wave, the portable, to reduce his stress and improve his endurance. Think about that for a minute. If there's heart rate coherence and heart rate fitness, and you're an endurance athlete, you can continue to adjust over time. This gymnast, Ross, says, I use HeartMath before performing each routine, and it helped me to feel calmer and more relaxed. I'm sleeping better and generally have more energy in the gym. This is another thing I found with almost every single athlete, although we didn't talk about sleep right off the bat, although I do now because they taught me, is that in using the heart rate coherence tools, without exception, everybody started to sleep better. They didn't go to sleep, like this. They used it before bed. And where do we recover? We recover when we sleep. And as you get older, it's even more important. Trust me. And so the improvement of sleep also impacted their ability to train and stretch into a greater peak performance. It's vital for the athlete to have efficient sleep. And this is why I definitely recommend that people use it before bed. Now, if there are any golfers out there, you're going to be happy about this one. The Secret Edge of Golf. A golf magazine in 2000, I think it was 7, did a whole spread on the HeartMath tools and the measurable differences. And he says HeartMath techniques show how to take control of your emotions, enabling you to make dramatic improvements in your game. He says, I put my students, top-level professionals, on the launch monitor before and after their HeartMath practice, and most see their club head speed increase and ball flight control improve. Distance and ball flight control improve with remarkable consistency. Now listen to that. It's measurable. Before you use the tools, you step out, then after you use the tools. It's measurable, and it's consistent improvement over time. And Laird Small, the director at Pebble Beach in the Golf Digest in 2007 article, he says, I found in my life, using the M-Wave, that I am able to get into the zone and stay in the zone. The M-Wave gives golfers techniques to control themselves while under pressure and intense situations so that they can use the situations to the best advantage, both athletically and in life. This is important for high performance. Are you starting to hear this generalization in athletics and in life? So the better we manage our stress, the better our life can be. I included this one because he was so enthusiastic. This golfer says, today was a massive breakthrough for me. I got it to 7 under par under the West Course at Wentworth today. Finished at 5 under. I made 2 eagles, narrowly missing eagle on the 18th as well. I have not shot a round like this in the last 3 years, in practice or in tournaments. The inner calm I felt during my round was unbelievable. A lot of people will say this is unrecognizable. Using the HeartMath techniques, I know without question this is all due to HeartMath, and so thankful to you for introducing this fantastic tool. The results are there. Now, a baseball coach who's a former major league pitcher says, I love the way he says this, when the brain has negative activity, it can be hate, anger, doubt. It impedes the electrical impulses and motor skills that throwing a baseball requires. Using the M-Wave changes this. So is it using the M-Wave, or is it smoothing out the heart rhythm so that the body has a smooth and even trajectory? Okay? Tennis fans? Once I started using HeartMath before and during each tennis game, I was able to hit the sweet spot more often and for the first time reach the finals and won in straight sets. This heart rate coherence practice really does help you get into your sweet spot with your heart rhythm more efficiently. This is another example of what happens with a team. This is a high school coach. Now, I started thinking about high schoolers learning how to get into heart rate coherence. I think we should start in kindergarten, but I raised 2 boys, and I could have used this then. They could have used it, but I really could have used it. So this basketball coach says, We're getting great results are happening from my basketball team. They use HeartMath to stop frustration, nervousness, and anger, and to transform negative thoughts like I can't to I can. They use the M wave to create balance and focus and the biological state of optimal performance. Here's the measure, the number of turnovers dropped significantly, and their shooting percentage increased. During each timeout and at halftime, we use HeartMath. This is transferred onto the court, and the team was able to execute and perform with great success. This team coherence translated into wins on the basketball court, and we ended the season with 15 wins, 1 loss, a new record. Can you imagine? Now, we can't leave out football, or I wouldn't be able to go home. So Billy Cundiff, a kickoff specialist and place kicker, he says, not only were my mental skills continually improving, but they were working in game conditions, not just practice. Here's a key. When they say game conditions or tournaments, that's where the pressure's up, right? So when I follow the program, he says, I was killing the ball and having a great time doing it. People in general don't deal with stress well. Moving forward, stress will be the least of my worries. If you ever see one of my games live, just watch me on the sidelines. My personal M-Wave will be getting plenty of use. So, let's do a little review. Teach first things first, heart rate coherence. Your heart really does have the answer. Remembering that the heart is a muscle has memory, and you can train it. By training in heart rate coherence, you can increase your awareness of how your thoughts and emotions affect your body. It'll teach you how to effectively get into the zone for that optimal performance. It increases self-confidence and self-control, and it improves focus and stressful training and in races. So basically, when the going gets tough, you can go somewhere that makes it easier and more efficient. Now, I certainly don't want to leave out one of the most important peak performers. How about the student? Studying, performing, taking tests, writing papers, trying to figure out all the online stuff. This young man got referred to me. That's actually not him. He did wake up when he came into my office. No. He had a moderate diagnosis of attention deficit disorder, and he had to go into the MCAT studying for his medical school entrance exams. He had some weeks to go, and he was studying 6 to 7 hours a day. After 2 weeks, he reported fear, anxiety. He wasn't sleeping. He had dark circles under his eyes, and he was getting scared because he felt his comprehension had hit the wall, had peaked out. And so he came in, and I explained about heart rate coherence. I explained about the M wave and how to get into coherence, gave him the handheld, and said, do this before your long study sessions, do this after your long study sessions for anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes, and do this before bed. The advantage of having the technology is you have something that says whether you're in low, medium, or high coherence, and you have something to look at. It's good feedback. So he followed orders, and he used it before bed and before his 6-hour study periods and afterwards. Within 2 days, he shaved off an hour of his practice test, which stayed consistent over the next few weeks. He started sleeping soundly. His mood improved, which his family was very happy about. No more dark circles, and his attitude was one of happy anticipation for the MCATs. Okay, that was a little weird, but the results remained consistent. He took the M wave into the parking lot before the MCAT exam, got into coherence for about a half an hour, and then found himself spontaneously breathing throughout the exam. He still shaved, kept that hour shaved off. And the good news is his score was remarkable, even better than he had anticipated. All he needed was some heart rate coherence training, and that rebooted him. And remember, it wasn't a one-shot deal. He continued to use it over time. Heart rate coherence is a state of optimal learning. It's been shown that we have better comprehension when we're in heart rate coherence. You hear that, students? There is something that I add to heart rate coherence training when I work with athletes in particular, and that is visualization. So we do know that when we visualize, what's the old saying? Oops, wait. We can actualize. So when you work with athletes, of course, it's an integrated approach. You add keys to this heart rate coherence training. You visualize the perfect performance. Even the student, visualize passing that test with ease in your perfect state. And you visualize it while you're in heart rate coherence, over and over again. So your pictures are your performance. I don't know if you know, and I have no idea how somebody figured this out, but 45 to 90,000 thoughts and mental pictures a day. So your performance is going to go in the direction of your most predominant thoughts and pictures. And for Brian, there was a hesitation in his thoughts and pictures. And remember the old days when they used to show, like, let's say football after a game, they'd show all the mistakes? Yeah, that was great because it was a teaching tool, right? We don't do that anymore. We show the mistakes for a learning opportunity, but always end with the perfect play. Always end with the perfect performance. And imagine what would happen if those teams were getting into heart rate coherence together while they were watching the perfect plays. I don't know. I'm waiting for the NFL to call me. So blending zone training with visualization and positive emotions really can help you focus on what you want and what you want in your performance, and it'll activate that memory. Remember that the mind doesn't know if it's real time, real doing it, or really in your mind. And so just some keys to visualization, just to remember, what you do when you visualize is you picture yourself succeeding. In real time, you're in your body, okay? You're looking through your own eyes at this picture. You're seeing it, you're feeling it, and you're saying it to yourself. And you're breathing in the feeling and the felt sense of success while you're in heart rate coherence. Now, remember the power of our thoughts, whether they're negative or bad thoughts, they have the same psychological and physiological response that real life experience has. But so do positive memories and thoughts. So when this young man, having completed his first triathlon, when he sees this picture, you think he remembers how it felt coming across that finish line? And the people here are smiling. Do you remember when you succeeded at something and when you were done and how great it felt? Breathe it in. Get that felt sense of success. Pictures speak 1,000 words. Visualizing can trigger positive feelings or they can trigger negative feelings. So before we wrap up, I do want to get back to this concept of the yips. So when your yips persist, how do you first identify it? If you're in your sport and you think you can do better, but you haven't been able to quite get beyond, that might be a yip. It might be a limit. Or maybe all you need is heart rate coherence. In the case of Brian, the competitive cyclist, it became very clear to us. He did the heart rate coherence. His performance improved. But was he at his peak performance? No. Because he could still sense a hesitation and he believed he could do better. But he had no idea why he wasn't. Dr. Grand, a colleague and friend of mine, just published a book called This Is Your Brain on Sports. And he says that the roots of all significant performance problems are in athletes' sports trauma history, especially in sports injuries, which are simultaneously physical and emotional traumas. Dr. Grand has coined the term repetitive sports performance problems, or RSPPs. So in Brian the cyclist case, his RSPP, he didn't know what it was related to. We realized later in taking a trauma history, we still didn't know about the 8-year-old thing until we did EMDR, but that he had witnessed 4 months before his cornering decline, this accident in front of him. It was far in front of him, so he was in no danger. So what's the problem, right? Tough it out, get over it. That's what we're told as athletes. Tough it out, get over it. And so what we discovered is Brian had had his own repeated sports problems that originated, here's the beauty of EMDR, you can find where they originate at 8 years old. It was stored in his nervous system. Traditional psychology, sports psychology, did not address these deeper issues. We addressed guided imagery and visualizations, but until recently, we haven't added, the heart rate coherence and doing some deeper digging in EMDR and then another process called brain spotting. So mental toughness begins in the heart. It's not complicated. You can do it, and it will make a difference. So, is it time for questions?
Great, thank you so much, Sara. I'll start out with some questions from the virtual audience and give you all time to formulate your thoughts here. First one here, how do you achieve heart rate coherence in sports where heart rate variability is key to fundamental to the sport, like football, baseball, where your heart rate will go from, will vary by 40 beats a minute or something. How does that play into?
Right. Well, in its simplest form, remember the chart that we saw. It doesn't matter where your heart rate is. When the pressure's on, you can still, this isn't a state of relaxation. That's the confusion. This is a state of focused breath and attention. So the more you practice heart rate coherence, I have athletes who are practicing in their training on the bike, in the pool. How did that woman do it when she was pushing as hard as she could go? She centered herself. She paid attention to her heart. And then she began to get in a rhythm at a very high exertion level. What didn't happen is she didn't go into fight or flight. She didn't go like this into freeze. Oh my gosh, am I going to be able to do this? She was at a very high level of exertion, the highest she had ever done, and she was in heart rate coherence, a smooth and even pattern, and an evenness between the beats. So it doesn't matter your level of exertion. What matters is whether you can emotionally shift into that solid heart rate variability. Does that help?
Yes. And here's another kind of three-part question. How widely accepted is heart rate coherence, and is it being more quickly adopted in certain sports, and if so, why?
Well, I really think I don't know how widely accepted it is, because every time I teach it, people are like, what? Really? This is so interesting. And then I meet other people who have been doing this for a long time, like some of these athletes. So it's spreading rapidly. The research behind it is very solid. I actually just got a call from somebody at a medical school who wanted me to come teach this at the sports medicine club on campus. And so these young doctors get that heart rate variability has a lot to do with handling stress and our ability to get beyond our peak, our recent peak performance. So I don't know. I'm trying to spread the word.
And a lot of questions on its broader application. So I'll combine a couple questions into one here. Does this potentially have application? I think I actually saw it come up on one of your slides. Does this have application to injury recovery? And another question came in about, do you utilize some of these techniques in other aspects of your practice outside of performance coaching, like perhaps depression, trauma, insomnia, relationship issues?
Okay, so the first one?
Injury recovery.
Injury recovery. Okay, so there has been some research out of the Institute of Heart Math about pain tolerance and being in heart rate coherence. What I have found consistently is heart rate coherence. When you're in the zone, your pain can go from an 8, 9, 10 down to a manageable 4. Remember what we're talking about in the energy system. So your system is synced up, it's running more efficiently. You don't have to be in fight or flight. The cortisol, adrenaline is not getting dumped into your system. So if you're running more efficiently, you can manage pain and injury more efficiently. You can rest more solidly. What do we do when we have injury? Oh, darn it, it's going to mess up my race. What's going to happen now? I can't train. I've done this before, can you tell? No, you get into heart rate coherence. You can continue to train in ways that will help speed up your recovery. And the other question was, do I use this in other forms?
Practice, yeah.
Yes, I actually had the honor of working with Heart Math and writing the Heart Math guidebook and working with trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder. This heart rate coherence training, getting in the zone for people who suffer from traumatic, post-traumatic stress, is very empowering. People come in with flashbacks, their hypervigilant nervous system, they're in a constant state of fight and flight, which is an energy drain. You begin to teach them how to get into heart rate coherence, and they actually feel right away that there's something they can do to reboot. And they can do this all the time. I have people who suffer from lots of anxiety, and that are not just athletes, but other anxiety disorders, who keep their M-wave in their car, in their briefcase. It's been very rewarding to see what this can do in a variety of contexts. When we're doing traumatic emotional processing with EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, it can be there can be some points of emotional dysregulation. It can be very heightened sense of emotion. I always start with heart rate coherence training, because then the person knows that they can downregulate themselves wherever they are, whether they're in the office, out of the office, and it's a very confidence building and powerful experience. Sleep disorders, I work with a lot of first responders, whether they're veterans or cops or firefighters, and their heightened sense of fight or flight, they're just used to it. Their level, they're up here. They're not like the rest of us. They're used to a hypervigilant state. But when they lie down to go to sleep at night, it's not always easy. And so teaching them heart rate coherence, peak performance mental toughness training, then they can downregulate and reboot, because once we're rebooted, then we're more efficient. And so you wake up more rested. And then I ask people too to do it in the morning before you get out on your day. Okay, so yes, it's really used across the board.
Great. I'll take one more from the virtual audience, and I'll turn to the live audience here. Question about rebooting in quick-moving sports, especially contact sports. Football comes to mind, they say, where I think they're getting at, say there's contact, and that obviously anger, frustration is going to happen as part of the game. And then, but there's a next play that's going to occur in about 30 seconds.
Right.
How do you work with players in sports like that?
It's very exciting to work with a variety of athletes, because each sport has a unique place that you can reboot. And you really have to discover it within the athlete. The football players, there are times they're on the sidelines, right? And they're like this. But when they're getting into their heart rate coherence, as you saw that one kicker, also in between plays. My tennis players, we talk about as they're walking back to the baseline, as just before they serve. So we develop these places for the particular athlete to incorporate this heart-focused breathing wherever they are in their sport. I worked with an elite triathlete who coupled her heart rate coherence training with a mantra. She said to herself, it was a positive statement. And here she was in Maui in a race at the World Championships, and she had a fall. Blood, mud, okay, it was bad. She got up, got her mantra going, got her heart rate coherence going, and she made up the lost time and took first place. She had a tool in the moment of pain and needing to have full exertion to make up the time and take first place. And that was the tool that she used.
Great. Any questions from the audience?
Mm-hmm.
Wait a second.
I'm Gary Woods. I'm an MFT student in 6510, which right now is chemical dependency and drug addiction. But I'm also a Vietnam vet, been through some PTSD myself. I just wonder, how quickly does this technique, how fast can you do it? I mean, can you do this technique in a relatively short time, or does it take a while for it to kick in?
Yes and yes. It's like any kind of training. If you just do it once, it might be helpful that one time, but the heart is a muscle, and heart rate variability is to be trained. And to me, it's a lifelong tool. I had a client come in who had a very tragic loss of her mother in a car accident, and she and her mother were very close. And she came to see me after about 8 months, and she was still in profound grief. She was the therapist. And so she kept thinking, well, I'm going to get better, I'm going to get better, I'm going to get better. And after some attempts at getting better, she was getting worse. When she came into my office, she was, hunched over, traumatic grief, and she right away started telling me the story of the tragic death of her mother. So I honored that story, but said, for right now, can we get back to that? And I wanted to start with heart rate coherence. And she said, well, I can't breathe. It hurts too much. Because sometimes when you start training people in heart rate coherence, it's foreign and it's uncomfortable. And there's been such a constriction that that's what's become familiar. So it's not always a feel good. Training doesn't always feel good, right? And so she said, I can't do it. I said, okay, well, why don't you keep telling me the story? But just for now, place your hand on your heart. And so she said, I can do that. Heart focus. That was the first step of the 3. She began to continue the story of the tragic death as she kept her hand on her heart. And as she started the story and continued, I watched her breathing begin to shift just by having her hand on her heart. And by the end of the session, she still had her hand on her heart. I guess I should have told her to take it down, but I didn't want to. She was walking out of the office and she turned and said, nothing will bring my mother back, but maybe I can breathe again. I haven't breathed in 8 months. She walked down the hall, and I happened to be able to see how she got in her car, and she still had her hand on her heart. So I always teach it first. It's the first place to go. It's the best place to go. And the more you do it, the easier it's going to get. Now, when you're suffering from trauma, it's a skill that you can take with you in between sessions, which gives me a lot of reassurance as a trauma specialist and helping people move through some of these traumatic memories, because it's not comfortable. And it's a big relief to me to be able to provide this teaching and this tool. And actually my clients, initially my trauma clients taught me. They came back and they were using it. They call it that breathing thing. They don't care about the science behind it. What they care about is, this works and I felt better. Okay, so let's keep building on that. So great question. And urges, you mentioned addictions. Heart rate coherence, have your urge, get into heart rate coherence and see what happens to the urge. It's really interesting, okay, because it shifts. It shifts that emotional shifting. The message to the brain gets out of fight and flight. And so oftentimes the urge will diminish significantly with just enough time to get you to the next place. Thank you.
Just a couple more. One student wonders what roles, other factors that affect heart rate might play. Do you discuss nutrition, hydration, weather?
Absolutely.
Heat? Yeah.
Yes, and yes. Although I am not a nutritional expert, and I'm certainly not a weather expert, but when you're an athlete and you're out there, things can change in a moment. That picture you saw, the triathlete with the energy drain, energy gain, she really did think she saw a shark. And it was a fin out there in the water. And it was that first glance, it was like, and then it was a dolphin, which is a little more reassuring, but, and it continued it kicked her into this fight or flight mode because she was already at a level of exertion. And so coming out of the water, running up the ramp, getting through the timing, getting to the bike, she was still like this. She didn't know heart rate coherence at the time. She would have been able to reboot herself coming in the water and out of the water, so that by the time you go to the next event, which is the bike, that you're synced up again, and it's like a fresh start.
I have just 2 more questions here. Are there certain sports or activities, in your opinion, that you find are particularly susceptible to, where the athletes are particularly susceptible to the yips?
No, because I work with so many people from different sports. It's interesting, when you take a sports history, a lot of athletes start very, very early, maybe in a different sport. And they've had interactions with coaches, with parents, with fellow athletes. So some of the yips can be memories stored early on in decisions that were made, or injuries. Injuries are a big thing. Our bodies weren't meant to. I worked with a gymnast who was the top of the pyramid, and then when she flips and she comes down, well, they dropped her once. I mean, your body's not meant to just fall and completely trust that you're going to be caught. And she had that body memory, although mentally she goes, oh yeah, that happens. So if you talked to her, it looked like it was nothing. But when she talked about the routine, you could see this little subtle yip. And that's when we moved into the EMDR. Although she's now doing heart rate coherence while she's standing up at the top of the pyramid, way up in the sky, and before she comes down. So it's very interesting. It can be used in all different sports. It's really about the history of the athlete, about the yips.
Okay, the last question I have is from our audience, our virtual audience. What do you do with clients who have confidence issues, suffer from anxiety, and have lots of difficulty, I'm struggling reading my own writing here, controlling negative thoughts? That seems like such an important aspect of this. What if that's a real problem for them? How do you work with those types of athletes?
You know, there's an old school of thought that many of our parents helped us develop, and that was motivate by pain. Motivate by negative thoughts. Oh, I suck at this, or I could do that, or I'm not as good as that. It's like we're going to motivate ourselves by being negative. And some people do that. I used to do that until I realized it's very inefficient. It can work. So a lot of athletes will say, well, it's worked for me before. I said, great. If you'd like to keep doing it, go for it because it's worked for you before. But do you think you're at your peak performance? That's what we were talking about. We're not just talking about any performance. Are you at your peak? Brian the cyclist competitively was doing great. He should have just been happy, right? But something inside said he wasn't at his peak performance. And so I wanted to quickly also say, somebody asked about nutrition and hydration. A lot of times when I'm working with somebody and they're in the red in the technology, which means low coherence, and even generating the positive thought and feeling is not shifting into a higher level of coherence, I've discovered, because my clients teach me a lot, I give them a glass of water. And it's so interesting how many of us are dehydrated and we don't even know it. A glass of water, back to the coherence training, and they move forward. The other thing that works about 80% of the time. 99% of the time to shift into a higher level of coherence is bringing the positive feeling, the felt sense of gratitude into the breath. Now, when you're out on the field, football, running, we have some runners here, and you're hitting a wall, and you smile and say, I can do this. I've done it before. You start remembering when you've done it before. You generate, while you're at a high level of exertion, a positive feeling. Your heart rhythm gets into a smooth and coherent pattern, and something happens and you're able to push forward. That's that resiliency that happens.